Joe, when people think of compare the market, they think of meerkats and ads, but you think platforms, architecture, revenue pipelines. So the first question I wanted to ask you was, how much of compare the market's growth came from marketing and how much came from technology?
Oh, I'd love to say it was all from technology. No, there's a huge amount of pre-existing brand there and just an absolutely fantastic commercial team, and everyone knows there's a brilliant marketing team there. But to make any money at Compare the Market, you need technology. Everything that makes money there relies on them getting a customer the best price, because otherwise people just don't buy it. So it was an absolute privilege to work for. But yeah, complete chaos trying to get everything done. But that fun kind of chaos. So yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned me before that your technology team was rather large, and probably a lot larger than people would expect. But how large was the technology department and what did you actually look after?
Yeah, so when I joined, technology was, I think it was about half the company, and still is somewhere near half of the company. So broad numbers, I think it was around about 450, 500 in total. And I, throughout my years there, looked after about up to 250, maybe 300 at one point, because I ended up with 2 roles when I went for one, which was something we can talk about in a bit. But yeah, really big technology team, really broad, really focused.
Yeah. What were the core areas that you looked after then?
So the core areas that I looked after was what you would call the transactional side. So everything that the customer interacts with on the front end, all of the web and mobile apps, all of the APIs that are driving that, and essentially everything that's going down to the insurers and getting the quotes and then producing data. And then there was data engineering and data science who dealt with all of that data to try and make some of the magic happen, which I was fortunate enough to actually run data engineering for about 6 months while we were looking for a new person.
Yeah. And I wrote this as well, so I didn't forget. But how much of Compare the Market's revenue was your technology team ultimately responsible for?
Oh, you could argue this.
Surely it's 100%.
Till you blue in the face, but it's essentially 100%. Yeah. The only revenue stream for Compare the Market is the commission or the service fee that they get from the insurance providers, it's all detailed on the website, super transparent. They're so clear. But yeah, every penny that we made was through technology. Yeah.
That's crazy. Do you feel like the execs really bought into what the tech team were doing then?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was. I was brought on because the execs were trying to drive a completely new direction in order to be able to move faster and just provide much better outcomes for customers. They had this brilliant vision that they've created where they can really get you the absolute best deal.
Yeah, which is very rare to hear. When I speak to any technology data leader, they're struggling to gain investment from the board or just have them understand what tech can actually do for them. So it's quite a privilege, but I suppose a lot of it must have been you articulating, highlighting what the value of data and technology is to be able to put it into practice and deliver those solutions.
Yes, to some degree. I can't take credit for much of that. My counterpart, the product director, was brilliant, but then we also had all of the execs knew what they wanted to achieve and then aligned on it. And the conversations were very rarely, we want to do this thing, can we have the money? And in fact, the execs were trying to achieve a goal. How much money is it going to cost? And if we give you more money, can we go faster? And at that point, you remove that constraint of resource, but then get constrained by resource because you can only have so many people working on so many things before they grind to a halt.
Yeah. So what metrics did you use internally to prove that link between engineering and commercial performance?
So the classic one of return on investment. So how much are we spending? How much are we making? That was quite easy to quantify. We could look at how much we spent each year and what the revenue uplifts were and what was driving those. There's also sort of tailwinds in the market and other things that shift, and that's why it's difficult to quantify it. But in terms of out and out value, it was the amount of time it took to get a feature out and then the impact of that feature.
Yeah.
Generally. And the numbers were surprising because sometimes the smallest change would have the biggest impact and save a huge amount of money. And then that money just got reinvested in and created more change. But rather than looking at everything individually, we had sort of large themes of work. So how do we make the product broader? How do we make it more intelligent? And so we were sort of measuring along those lines rather than each penny and each pound, equates to something else.
Yeah. And on the intelligence part, obviously I wanted to find out more about what you're working on at the minute and what you did in the past. AI, intelligent automation, everything within that. What kind of technology solutions were you working on at Compare the Market in relation to AI, intelligent automation, and the likes?
Yeah, so obviously I can't discuss too much about the detail of it. It's a highly competitive market. And obviously we haven't mentioned this, but I left Compare the Market in December last year. So it was all around, it's easy to describe how you would go about getting the best deal for a customer. It's very, very, very complicated to write a kind of state machine or rule machine or writing all of the complex business rules and trying to find all of the different variables. And essentially what you end up describing is a very, very poor effective machine learning. You end up writing the equivalent of it. So the data science team took that and ran with it, and essentially they use very, very intelligent people to create stuff that I still can't get my head around. I understand the output, I understand the process it's going through, how they actually made it do that, I've got no idea. But they really are searching for the best deals for you at the right time, using lots of different signals from the market to make sure that you are getting the best deal that you can. With that, they use, with people's consents, all of their data that's available to them, and the whole thing scales based on how much consent you give it. The more you tick the box and let them process your data, the less you're going to have to fill in a form. And people sort of get worried about the kind of privacy aspect of that. But it saves you so much time, and ultimately you're going to go and have to type it in 20 times into 20 websites. So why not just have the robots do it for you?
Yeah. Do you feel like a lot of customers don't necessarily realize what Compare the Market or the likes are actually doing with the data? Like, does it concern them?
I think people fall into sort of three camps. There's people very concerned about their data privacy and they want to control every aspect of their data. And so there's lots of safeguards and guardrails in place to make sure that those people are catered for. Then you have the other two camps of people who sort of know but don't particularly care, and people who don't know and definitely don't care because they've got no idea that kind of thing exists. I think the marketing team do a good job of explaining it, but when you're really wanting to describe the system and the machine learning and the big data behind it, it's not something that sort of appeals to most people outside of technologists, and that's a very small market considering the broadness.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so how key was customer data for you in the technology team?
It was treated as a first-class citizen. It was, for all the parents out there, you had to treat it like your firstborn. It had to be protected. It had to be looked after. There was a huge amount of rigor around all the environments that we're in. We had an absolutely brilliant InfoSec team who were always treading that fine line between locking it down as safely as it can be, but also finding ways to enable engineers to actually try new things and do new things with the data. And that was great. And because of that, we moved away from your data just being some information in a form, and instead how do we build a picture around you and everything that you do and want to do and maybe are thinking of doing, and trying to sort of help predict. And when we're predicting things that you might be doing in the future, do we have the right information, and how can we kind of build up that picture to essentially serve the customer? Because, as I said before, they only make money if you buy something through them. So crawl over glass to get the customer to buy something in the most ethical way. And their focus was by getting the absolute best deal to the customer. That's the best and only way to do it.
Yeah, it certainly helps, but I've been a customer of Compare the Market for a while. I haven't told you this. You sometimes forget that you even are. But I think from when I first used the platform, it was the visuals, the interface that really appealed. It just seemed a lot more streamlined than any of the other competitors.
Yeah.
So did you acknowledge that when you were there? Like, I suppose, how prominent were the visualization pieces, the UX, the UI?
Yeah, so we completely unified the UI to make it as simple as possible. And the reason for sort of unifying it all was to be able to bring all the features that you might put into one journey to all journeys, and making that something that the customer gets everywhere all the time, and trying to help pre-fill things for the customer, because generally people's names don't change, their address doesn't change that often. Some people go through lots of cars in a year, some people keep the same car for 10 years. So it's, if your car's not changing, your address isn't changing, you haven't had an accident, you haven't changed the locks, you haven't burnt down your house, you haven't done this, you haven't done that, why do you need to go and fill it all in again? And if it's the same for buildings insurance as it is for contents insurance, and you're insuring the same thing, why do you have to type it all in again? So it's just trying to do the simple thing to kind of reduce that burden on the user, but introducing enough friction that they don't shoot through the journey and don't actually read what they're buying, because ultimately they are buying insurance or a money product.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it certainly helps. I know the predictive answers in any kind of form now are everywhere. So use Google Chrome, and then the technology just sorts it for you. It's a bit of a game changer at the minute, but then there's still a worry that the speed that you can actually fill out the form is probably too quick for the customer or the user to understand what they're signing up to.
Yeah.
It's like the data's passed into these boxes so quickly, you assume it's correct, but I can't imagine it's correct all the time.
Probably not.
No.
And, to some degree, I'm thinking about some stuff I was doing this morning, actually. That's if you're still filling in the forms, because with Core Desktop and OpenAI and everything else, you can have it control the browser and fill the form in for you. So now we're getting into that world of when the company is doing it for you, there's lots of burden on the company to make sure that they're predicting it correctly, because they might get into some kind of trouble. What happens when you fill in the form with Claude and get it wrong?
Yeah.
And that would be really interesting. That'd be really interesting. That's a whole legal minefield.
Yeah. And you mentioned you left Compare the Market in December. Since then, I've seen you've been up to a lot.
Yeah.
Particularly on LinkedIn, I can see it all. So, I mean, you were leading one of the largest engineering teams in the UK. And
it's pretty big, yeah.
it was sizable across data engineering, architecture, but classic tech, software engineering. And then you walked away. So what were you thinking at that moment when you left the business? Like, why would you even think about leaving?
So it was actually a multitude of things. I've not actually talked outside of maybe some of my friend circles about this, but I'm more at peace with it now. Late last year, I got diagnosed as being autistic, and I was 42, and also got diagnosed as being ADHD as well, more recently. And so there'd always been these sort of challenges in the workplace where these problems were kind of popping up. Now, they weren't bad, but they weren't ideal, and it caused a lot of stress trying to understand it. And we'd got to a point with Compare the Market. The kind of change program that I was there to do was going to be about a 2 to 3 year change program. We got through most of it in about the first 18 months, and then the rest was kind of icing on the cake, and then starting to cruise and just sort of build the business thereon. And with the diagnosis and with all the travel, based in Morpeth and traveling down to Peterborough and London a lot, I kind of went, I just need some time to work out what this truly means. And I kind of looked at everything that was going on, and we'd done so much beyond what I was expecting to be able to do that on reflection, I'd already achieved like the main goals that I'd taken on that job. Because taking on a big leadership director's job after mostly being, the sort of cleverest engineer in the room type jobs for many years was such a leap and such a big personal change. But it was just time. It was time for me to just stop and think about what I was doing. So planned to take 6, maybe 12 months off, and about 4 or 5 weeks into taking time off, the ADHD kicked in, and started, trying to find things to keep myself busy with personal projects. The first one was the Unpack app, the sort of micro coaching app, which was probably 4 or 5 weeks of dopamine hits, like learning what it's like to release a product. And then after that, started to meet people in Newcastle who had different challenges that they were trying to face that were problems that I'd already solved, either at Sky or at Compare the Market. And I was just kind of saying to them, well, let's go for a coffee. I'll just talk you through some of these problems. And then after they've bought me 2 or 3 coffees and we've met 2 or 3 times and I'm getting paid in coffee and cake, I thought, actually, I could probably make a business out of this. And it's just gone mad from there, gone absolutely mad from there.
Yeah. What kind of challenges are people generally facing then that you're able to help?
So some of them are sort of, how do you scale your leadership? How do you transition from that sort of individual contributor to a leader? How do you approach sort of AI and data in companies that aren't traditionally data or AI companies? In fact, some of the companies I'm talking to, I had quite a weird conversation with one of them. They kept saying, we're going to introduce you to Dev, which I assumed was their development department. It turns out Dev was their developer. His name was Dev. And so that was really, really strange, because they just walked me over to this one person. They're looking at how can they use AI to run a sort of non-tech business, which is quite sort of forward thinking. And then I'm working in another 2 other startups. One startup I'm a co-founder of, which does LinkedIn ads optimization. And then very shortly, I join another startup as a fractional CTO, although I've already been an advisor for them for quite some time. So yeah, just keeping myself busy with mainly using AI rather than building AI.
Using AI. So what are you specifically using AI for?
Mm-hmm.
Like what are you using the technology and AI to solve problems, or are you looking at new technologies and thinking, I wonder how we could use this? Business case first or tech first?
Business case first. So an example of some of the stuff I'm working on at the moment, I'm working with one client who wants to build a mobile app and a web dashboard for that mobile app, who hasn't quite worked out if their business is going to be a success or not, and just wanted to create a prototype. So I kind of said, well, leave it with me. We'll have a chat. We'll do a little proof of concept and we'll see what happens. That's now turned into a end-to-end automated software factory that is currently running at 99.5% of the code is written by AI. the 5% that isn't written by AI, the 0.5% that isn't written by AI is stuff that I have to essentially click on things in Xcode that I haven't bothered to do desktop automation because all of this stuff's running in the cloud. And I'm sure there's loads of people sort of cringing at the idea of having complete pieces of software being written by AI. So just to double down on that, there's an AI product owner, an AI architect, a team of AI developers. But what I've done is I've taken my experience of running software teams, overseeing software development at scale, and think about, rather than worrying about the act of writing the code, what needs to go around that? Because if you're in a team of 300 people, you will be in a code base where most of that code is written by someone else. You don't know when they wrote it. You don't know how they wrote it. You're probably not going to find the original spec. They might not have written tests, and they might not have tested it very well. And that starts to sound very much like the stuff that Claude and Copilot kicks out. So then to fix those kind of teams, you go in and you put in automated tests. You go in and put in end-to-end tests. You go in and put reviews of acceptance criteria and different kind of tests. So my pipelines have, rather than human in the loop, automation in the loop. And so, yes, AI writes the code. In fact, AI writes the user stories based off me just sending it single line sentences. It then writes a user story, goes and runs a PR, reviews and refines the code until it's ready to merge into main, automatically merges based on all of the tests passing and the coverage being high enough, then runs on a staging environment that if the client's happy, as soon as they click yes, it can go out to like the sort of prototype MVP environment that would be their production environment. And the only humans in the loop is me at the start, feeding it single line sentences for features, and the people at the end going, oh, the software works. If they say it doesn't work, it just goes back in a loop. And so the initial run of that built an iOS app, a web dashboard that had user-created content, user sign up with 2FA, all in Firebase, user management, branding. You can remote brand the web app and everything else. It took 20 hours. Wow. Kicked it off at 5 o'clock on a Sunday night. About 12 o'clock on the Monday, got a Slack message. And the Slack message was, everything works, it won't build because this file is missing. And the file that was missing was the file that you need to go into Xcode for. So I went and got the file out of Xcode, committed it in, created a new issue and said, the file's there, now finish it off. And about 3 hours later, there was a build in the App Store.
That's unbelievable.
And
it works.
And it works.
Right. Yeah.
It works. And
most importantly.
And the clients signed off on that iteration. And so the last time they had something like that built was somewhere between 4 and 6 weeks for a team of 5 people. And this was 20 hours in about...
Did it overnight. And the scary thing is the software licensing cost. If I ran that 24/7, it would be less than £1,000 a month. And it's going at a rate of like 10 to 15 times faster than a human. That's crazy.
It's nuts.
Are you faster yourself or with 300 engineers then?
Well, if you have 300 engineers, you are likely to have people that aren't like me, that sort of do 80% of the code and then the dopamine hit disappears and wanders off and can't be bothered to finish it. So I would say I'm probably faster to the 80% and then getting it through the line. That's where you start to slow down. I think...
Is that where AI helps though?
Yeah, AI helps immeasurably. I mean, I've got sort of... I feel old now. Yeah, over 20 years experience doing this stuff. And so I can easily look at a piece of code and already start to see, I need to change this, I need to change that, I could do this, I could do that. And like everyone, started with Copilot and Cursor, highlighted a bit of code and said, this doesn't do what I want it to do, invert this loop and do something else. Now, when I'm doing my personal stuff, I've written my own Visual Studio Code extension that essentially offloads tasks to Cord in a Docker container that pulls down the code, makes all the changes, stuffs it in a branch and tells me it's ready. So I'm not highlighting a piece of code and waiting for the AI. I'm highlighting a piece of code, go and sort that out, highlighting another piece, go and sort that out, highlighting another piece, go and sort that out, highlighting another piece, go and sort that out, over and over and over again. And then when I get to the point where my machine's about to set on fire, pull out my iPad and start writing issues for the cloud-based software factory that goes off and does the other stuff. And just the speed is insane. And it's all about getting the right clients that aren't super picky on nailing down the requirements to 100% and being a bit more sort of loose and vague. And, you know, if it fits 90% of what they've asked for, then that's good. That allows you some wiggle room and allows you to be a bit more creative. And if I can build an app overnight and then have 2 weeks to fix it and still be faster than most teams, I'm laughing all the way.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
How have your views on technology and AI changed since you left? Now you've had a bit of freedom to actually research.
I think we were I was struggling to get people to play with it, to try it out. We were giving people the opportunity, and I think when people are very sort of heads down in work mode and they're trying to get things done, they maybe don't embrace technology as much as when you're kind of in that kind of middle ground where you're going, if I make this work, I don't have to get a real job. And I've had a real job, and my kind of neurodiversity kind of meant that if I have a real job, I have to act like a real human. Whereas if I stay at home and make the robots do all the work for me, I can play with my 2 and 3 year old because they're running around the house all the time and still make money and still have fun and still have those human interactions. But it just unlocks a lot of things. So I think the environment's completely different. And part of the work I'm doing with some of the startups is trying to get them to look at, if you know you have like a starter for 10, like a baseline of data and technology and application that you need to build in order to have a product, try and find the best way to just buy it so that you can start selling. You know, is there something you can buy off the shelf that gets most of the task done so that you can focus on the differentiation? Whereas I think sometimes I got caught in sort of the bigger world of everything we write is important, therefore that's the differentiation, and it's because we write it, it's important. Whereas now I'm looking at, am I actually solving problems that need to be solved, or can I buy this off the shelf? So like the mobile app, it uses things like Expo, which is a React Native packager. I'm still not really sure how it works. I just write a little command line, send it off, and suddenly it's running on my phone later on. So stuff like that. And, you know, for the data side, you know, there's loads of big data platforms. You don't need to write your own data platform. You don't need to go into AWS and GCP and code it from scratch. Just use the off-the-shelf stuff. In fact, if you know it's going to be mundane and you're story pointing something and you're going, all of this stuff is 1 point because it's dead easy, we're just going to do it over and over and over and over and over again. Write it once, tell the AI that's what you want 50 times, and then let it go and write them all for you. Because even if it gets them a little bit wrong, it takes you so much less time to go, oh, you've made the same mistake 50 times, I'll just sort that out, and you're done for lunch. You've done like weeks worth of work in a morning, and then you can focus on spending time on what's important.
What other technologies are you using around that?
Yeah, so for AI, mostly using Gemini, Claude, OpenAI, and Mistral. And then I've done, for one of my clients, I've actually done training of small language models. So we've done a bit of a distill from Google Gemini Pro down into a Gemma model using custom I'm trying to think of the word, using the sort of conversational techniques that the people in their business use so that the model talks like one of the people in their business.
Like speech recognition?
Not necessarily speech recognition, but more the kind of patterns of the way that people interact. So some people say, hey, how are you? Some people say hello. Some people say really odd, random probing questions. And it's, yeah. And some people say, what's on your mind? And yeah, if I was in Nottingham still, which is where I was born, it'd be A up. And it doesn't always translate. But when your whole business kind of starts interactions with what's on your mind rather than how can I help you, it's quite different to people. And so you retain that language, and then the agent talks like the people in the business and converses like them as well. So it's quite cool.
Yeah. Well, it sounds pretty cool. Cutting edge compared to most companies I've spoken to.
Apparently so, yeah. I mean, it becomes so normal when you just do so much of it so quickly. So, yeah.
Yeah. Generally speaking, going back to, I suppose, the start of being a founder and that journey,
yeah.
What do you know now, after nearly a year in, that you wish you knew before you committed to the startup?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of this from like someone who wants to start up their own firm.
Yeah, so I've been very fortunate that the two businesses that I actually have an ownership stake in, which is my own consultancy, that's essentially a service company for me going and working with lots of clients. And really, it's you need enough money or time in order to start a limited company so that you're protected. And starting a limited company, it's about 100 quid with Companies House, and then you need to do some accounts. Accounts can be expensive. They can be very cheap. I know from running a community interest company in the past, if you forget to do your accounts, then they just strike your company off, and then you pay them 35 quid, and then they bring your company back onto the register. It's not what I'm recommending for people. Do your accounts, get an accountant. Other than that, there's, for technology, there's really not a lot. Most people have a laptop already. You have a phone. It's about building relationships. So part of it is learning to talk to people, learning to get people engaged with what you're engaged in, and trying to find the right opportunities. Like, don't take on all work just because you have to. Take on the work that's going to work for you first and build it up, and then jack in your job, unless you're sort of like me and you've saved up over 10 years. So you've got your kind of like, screw this money, and can just stop working for a year and then just go and do it. But the way I kind of looked at it was I had an amount of runway and sort of thought, whatever I earn extends the amount of time I can take off. So the first thing we did was reduce some of our household income, and then just kind of said, right, our savings will cover us for a year. If you earn an amount of money, the savings last for a year and a half. If you earn a whole wage, then the savings give you that buffer afterwards. And so that's one way of doing it. The other is investment seems to be really easy to get. If you've got a good idea and you can talk the investors through what you need to do. I've worked with a lot of companies that have got investment and haven't got a huge plan, but the idea is very exciting and it's a huge differentiator. So go and have a look at the startup accelerators and the startup incubators. Tiny Seed is a brilliant one. Tiny Seed take a small sort of share option, they call it, where at some point they'll own 12% of your business if you have a massive IPO. Until then, they give you an amount of money to go and do stuff with, and then they give you a huge amount of perks. We've got for Linklo, the one that I'm co-founder of, we've got like GitHub Enterprise for free, Cloudflare Enterprise for free, a load of Google stuff for free. So we're not paying for any software and we're hosting for free. And it's finding those accelerators and in those accelerators, finding people that you can then go and talk to and rely on.
I wasn't even aware of that.
Yeah,
I probably need that myself.
yeah, Tiny Seed's a
Tiny Seed.
fantastic one. Yeah, they take a big chunk, but it's share options when you sell the business. And so if you're worrying about them taking the 12%, you've got to kind of think about, well, if I don't do anything with this business and I don't make a lot of money out of it and I don't get anything, then really, if that 12% somehow gets me the tools and the connections and the mentorship and the help, that it becomes a multi-million pound business.
No brainer.
You know, do you want 100% of nothing or 88% of many millions? And they have their, like some of the businesses that have sold through there in the hundreds of millions of dollars in the US. So it's crazy.
That's pretty cool. Are there any other startup accelerators or programs that you'd recommend for any new or up and coming founders?
So there's, we were talking about it earlier, the Insight in the Northeast. Is it Insight? Ignite, that's it, Ignite. There's so many insights in Ignite. Ignite in the Northeast. There's also innovation grants funds as well. So if you're building technology that has a significant R&D component to it, you can apply for grants from Innovate UK. And those grants range up to, from tens of thousands up to hundreds of thousands of pounds. And what you need for there is a structured plan, what you're trying to achieve, why it's good for the sort of UK tech scene, and an ability to execute on it. And that gets you off the ground, which is one of the easiest ways.
Yeah. I was amazed about how many people wanted to help me when I set up my own business at the start of the year. And the local network community in the northeast of England was obviously prominent, but also people from London, even the US, who just appreciate entrepreneurship and those moving into that world. It's obviously a bit of a ballsy move. So it makes a lot of sense, but there is a lot of help out there. You just need to know where to look. And ironically, if you were to search in the chatbot, what startup accelerators are there, it'll probably tell you, as long as you give it enough, details and context on what you're particularly looking for.
Yeah. Well, I've noticed that for Linko especially, we're getting a lot of leads from ChatGPT.
Really?
Yeah, lots of people are using AI search, and so it's ChatGPT and Perplexity. People are finding us. So I think people are really starting to use those much more often, and weirdly makes me think, why aren't I using those? Because I'm using Google, because I've used Google for the last however many years Google's been around. So I think I'm stuck in my ways, but I'm starting to notice a lot more traffic through those.
Yeah. How do you rank higher on the chatbots?
Oh, I wish I knew. The amount of money you could make if you were first in the AI search. I mean, you just have to look at all the people that were sort of the first SEO gods and the amount of fame and glory that they got. I think if you can crack the AI stuff, I imagine it comes down to the sort of the bias of the engine, as always, the type of things that it returns, and really, who are they scraping? So Reddit's stock price went down massively when OpenAI said that they're not scraping Reddit so much. So, trying to find who is getting hammered would be the real signal.
Yeah. So I wrote loads of questions, and actually the chatbot wrote half of them, which is fair enough. It is a useful tool, and we kind of moved into it. So a lot of organizations are wondering how effective these AI tools, generative AI tools, are for the business. There's a bit of a debate at the minute on, should you hire a new software engineer, or should you just give a new GenAI fancy tool to an existing engineer, and hopefully that will speed them up. So do you have any thought process on these GenAI tools and how quickly they can actually accelerate an engineer with their delivery?
Yeah, so I think I don't even play football, but I'm going to use a football analogy because hopefully that some people in the audience will get that. Technology, it's always a bit of hit and miss. But if you think about kids playing, Saturday morning, Sunday morning football, they've got a degree of skill, And in fact, kids are probably even better than most of the half-cut blokes who are also playing it at the same time. And they've all got a degree of skill with the ball, and they're all playing the same game. And in fact, they've probably got, some of them, decided to spend a few quid and have the same ball that they have in the Premiership and the World Cup. But they absolutely don't use it the same, and they definitely don't get the same results, and they definitely don't have the same ability with it. But to everyone, the result is the same. It's roughly 11 people running up and down a grass pitch and trying to stuff a ball in a goal. So you can have different people with different skills using the same tool and getting roughly the same effect to varying degrees, some people being better than others. But the key point of that analogy is that the more you play with it, the generally better you get, and the more time that you spend with it, the more chance you have. Now, there are people who will never make it to the Premier League, and it will be the same in engineering. But that's fine. Like, not everyone wants to be the most amazing engineer in the world. Some people like to just go and do their job, and over time they get better and better and absorb things and end up a level higher than they started, but they're not trying to shoot for the moon. And so AI allows you to scaffold and template and get through the basics. Something that actually got me into it quite heavily was as I was building Linklo, because we're just releasing a new version. As I was building it, I was like, right, I need to remind myself how to do Next.js. I need to remind myself how to do data. So I just used Firestore and was really lazy. And I built up some patterns, but a lot of the screens in it were all the same tables. And because they were the same tables, I started to copy and paste the code and then just rename things. And then I went, right, I'll just get a Copilot license and see what happens. And literally said to Copilot, can you copy and paste this and point it to a different table? And it did. And it did it perfectly. And I went, that's too easy. Do it more, do it more, do it more. And then you start to learn how to describe things to it. And weirdly, last night, I had this exact experience with my older kids. I said to my son, can you go and get your younger sister? So I've got a boy and 3 girls, and they're all younger than him. He didn't get me the right sister, and he did just stand at the bottom of the stairs shouting a name when he was stood next to me at the bottom of the stairs. I could have quite easily shouted the name. So then I had to be more specific, and I had to put some guardrails on it. And I had to say, can you go upstairs and tell the specific sister to come downstairs, and when you've told her, can you come back downstairs and not chase her and do everything else and go and do your piano practice? So he did. And what I've basically described is how you start talking to an LLM, because if you just say, go and do this thing, it'll go, yeah, sure. And it's got all of this sort of implied knowledge from all the different ways it knows how to do it. And you need to be more and more specific. And that's just a skill that you learn with experience and exposure. But if you do tell it, I want roughly this copied over there, they do a brilliant job of it. And that's where it's so good for people doing research and analysis, because it's kind of like, what does this page roughly say? And if it gives you something where it hasn't hallucinated, which is quite easy, you turn the temperature down and just get it to pull out keywords. It then comes back and says, this article is broadly about this. Well, it's much easier to get an idea of an article before you spend 30 minutes reading it to realize that it's not the right thing to be reading. And even if you discount it, you're doing research, you're probably going to read 100 articles anyway. So if you miss one, what's the end of the world? And so it's about being a bit more loose and a bit more kind of starting to describe things. But for young developers, it might teach you how to write code. But then it might teach you how to write code from 2 years ago. So it just takes time.
Yeah. Generally speaking, what tips and tricks do you have for people wanting to use generative AI?
Don't trust it. Just don't trust it. It will do a rough approximation of whatever it's trying to do. You have to find a way to validate it, and the validation needs to either be through automation, through a non-LLM way of doing it, or just reading what it's putting out. Essentially, it's just badly copying and paste. It's like copy and paste with dementia. I think it sort of like forgets words and forgets how things are constructed and just kind of approximates what it's copying and pasting. Be very specific in what you do and don't want it to do, and definitely read prompting guides for the model that you're trying to use. Because if I took the same prompt and put it in front of Gemini, ChatGPT, Mistral, Claude, I'll get vastly different results because they all interpret it differently. But if I rewrite the prompt for all of those to meet the type of language that they like, then I get roughly the same result. So yeah, and don't use generative AI for anything that's, important until you've kind of learned how to do the guardrails and block it. At best, it will do a 90% job, which is good, and it'll do it very quickly, and just spend some time validating it.
Yeah. How do you learn though? Say for someone who's not actually technical.
Yes.
Like say it's my grandma. How does she glue up on ChatGPT and chatbots and LLMs?
Does she need to?
I have no idea.
Yeah,
but possibly.
If you have an interest in something, then it's just go and start talking to an LLM. Just open up ChatGPT and start talking to it and see what comes through. And ChatGPT has voice out the box, so you can actually talk to it. From there, it's talk to them about the capabilities that they might have. So the LLMs often try to please you. So, when you say to an LLM, can you fill in my tax return for me? It'll turn around and say no. But if you added a tool, then I could. So then you say, right, how do I add a tool? It'll say, oh, you just add a tool by doing these things. And then you say, right, okay, give me the script, give me the instructions, give me the steps I need to do. Also, asking it how to prompt it better helps. So if you're wanting to get specific information out of an LLM, just say, I have a problem. I want to get this information out of you, but I don't know how to prompt you to get that end effect. And then it'll guide you through how to write a strong prompt that you can then read and see, is this getting me what I want? And if it is, chuck it in, see what you get.
Yeah. So if you have a problem with a chatbot, just ask the chatbot, how can you help me?
Pretty much,
basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is really strange. But I use it a lot because I can broadly describe what I want it to do, but I maybe won't think of all the edge cases. So I will, for the specific LLM that I'm trying to use, go and ask it and say, I'm trying to do this with you. If I gave you this and the information that I'm going to pass in, what will you do with it? And it'll rewrite the prompt for you, which is just weird. Absolutely weird.
Yeah. It's sophisticated though.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've spoken to some of the guys in the US who are building these things, building the systems, the code behind it. And they tell me this, I mean, they're salespeople as well, but it is becoming more and more intelligent by the day.
Yeah.
So I don't know how they're doing it. Obviously, you'll know more than me from a technical point of view, but it is incredible. The speed of delivery, the ideas around it. Now, I listened to a video on Sam Altman a few days ago, and he was talking about some of the innovations they've had at OpenAI. And actually, he's a sales guy, so he has his own agenda. He wants to push the business. But the focus at the business at the minute is how do we innovate as quickly as possible? So he has several engineers. He has the luxury of a massive budget to be able to invest and try ideas. And so naturally, these tools are going to become more sophisticated. So it's a really interesting power play. And I think for any leader who thinks it's just hype is possibly just unaware of what this is capable of doing. As a general theme, generative AI, but I've seen the ins and outs of it. It's incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all about how you apply it and how you think about problems. I mean, as with all technology, technology is just technology. Like it changes all the time. I remember sneering at someone about Node.js and JavaScript on the server. That's absolutely stupid. And then also sneering at someone about TypeScript, saying, oh, it's just a bad copy of C#. And now everything I write is pretty much TypeScript running on Node.js, and it's great. I mean, I write in lots of different languages, but I've realized that eventually it turns out to be quite a useful thing. I think with AI, people are just too rigid in their thinking around what it can actually do and how it can solve problems. And I use it for all sorts of things. I mean, one of the things that's really helped me is getting my emails organized. And so I've got a very, very small automation that reads all the emails in my inbox, sticks a label on all of them, and then when I've read them, moves them into different folders. So if I can't be bothered to move them into the folders, I just mark them as read, and the bot will move them later on. But then when things hit certain folders, it does other stuff. So if a receipt hits my accounting folder, it then gets sent to my accountant. So I've not forgotten to upload a receipt for ages. I don't do any expenses. And I was like, oh, it'd be really nice if my accountant had like a mobile app for me to upload receipts to. And then I realized that if I take a photo of the receipt and just send it to myself, then my bot will send it to my accountant and it gets uploaded and sorted. And as soon as you start doing stuff like that, you're like, right, okay, that's almost like having a PA. So what does that mean for PAs of the world? Well, you're not putting them out of a job. You're allowing them to do more interesting things. So my PA at Compare the Market was involved in getting communities together and organizing events and keeping people together and doing face-to-face communication. So AI can just get rid of all the boring, repetitive tasks, so you can spend more time on the actual value. And the weird thing is you end up working less hours a week, but you're more tired because, I'm working about 40 hours a week. But if I wasn't using AI, I'd probably be doing 80 hours a week. And so I'm allowing myself to be extremely productive for every hour of the day that I'm working, and all the boring admin stuff just gets done somewhere else. And when you start to think of it that way, it just makes life so much easier. And I think if I was working as a permie, probably shouldn't say this in case someone wants to hire me, I'd be able to just automate most of the tasks that you have, like meeting requests and people asking you for information that you've already sent them. And you're like, right, okay, I'll go and find the Confluence thing and send it back over to them. No, you can have something scanning your emails and go, yeah, they've asked that question before, or someone else asked the same question, and just send them the answer. And it becomes so much easier when you free yourself that way.
So how do I automate all these manual processes?
That's a good question. So if you're technical enough, there's a really cheap way to do it, which is things like Zapier and NA. Well, the technical way is I use NA10, which is an automation platform. They have a cloud offering, which is a bit pricey. You can run it yourself on Heroku for about $20, unlimited executions. So you're getting the equivalent of their £100 a month package. And I just have my own private instance. If you can't manage a Heroku instance, which to be honest, it took me 30 minutes to set it up and then I haven't touched it in 3 months, go and buy the cloud version, pay the extra bit of money, put the automations together, just drag and drop. Like when you see an email from Gmail, send it off to Claude, OpenAI, whoever. Here's some instructions with what to do with it. Here's a tool that lets you archive it, label it, respond to the person, and you build them up over time. And in fact, the code factory, the code farm runs in NA10. It's got GitHub triggers. So every time you edit an issue or put a change on a pull request, it triggers the farm to pick it up, run it through the AI, and then put it back in again. And then the automations for all the merging and the code reviews and everything else happen in there. But yeah, normal people who aren't techies.
Like me.
Yeah. So there's Make, Zapier, NA10. They're all drag and drop. You put your credentials in, you connect all the things together. And then when you reach the limits of their workflows, then you get in touch with people like me, and we help you with more sort of complicated solutions. But as yet, I haven't found anything I can't knock together in NA10 that I would then sort of get someone to pay me my daily rate to go and build for them, because the offset cost is just not worth it.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I keep hearing about NA10.
Yeah.
I don't specifically know what it does, but you've told me a little bit there. I'd have to go off and research. But the fact that that's becoming more popular or just being talked about,
Yeah,
suggests that they're on the right track.
Well, this is the thing. These tools have existed for years and years, and all they've been able to do is like, this thing happens, so send an email here. This thing happens, so send a Slack message there. And where they've just suddenly exploded is AI, because all of a sudden, something that you would get someone on Fiverr or one of these other platforms to do for you and build you a workflow that's got 100 or 200 nodes and all this complicated stuff, and every time anything changes in your workflow you have to go and change, is now 3 boxes, which is input, AI do something, AI you've got all your tools. That's it. And so you write some instructions and say, you've got full access to my Gmail, but you can't send any emails. And mine will schedule calendar stuff for me. So I still am paying for one cal because of the calendar syncing, but I'm about to replicate that myself. But those kind of like calendar appointment things where people send you a link and you have to go and choose a time and date, don't need that anymore. You can send me an email and say, are you free on Tuesday at 2:30? And the AI will go and look at all of my calendars and reply and say, yes, I booked a meeting in for you. Here you go. Here's a calendar appointment. And that took me 15 minutes to put together. Wow. And now I don't have to respond to any emails about whether I'm free. I don't even have to look at my own calendar in terms of, am I free? I just have to look at my calendar and go, okay, I need to remember to block out going to the gym. Otherwise I'm going to end up having meetings. Yeah. So I've just put blocks for the gym, blocks for basketball. And then all the other time is like, you can just book time in and it'll just happen.
Yeah. I'm assuming you must have some kind of security layer over that. So for example, if there are salespeople, speculative messages coming into your inbox now, are you free at 3:30?
Yeah.
How do you get around that?
For that to work, you have to be either in my CRM or on my client list for it to work. Or I have to have replied to you and said, I'll take a look, which is probably giving the game away. Anyone that's had an email from me that says, I'll take a look, and then gets a calendar invite now knows that I haven't actually taken a look. I've just replied and said, I'll take a look, which now comes up as one of those auto replies. And the AI does the rest of it for me and books in the calendar meeting.
Yeah, I received one of them yesterday from you.
Probably. But it's like, it's a weird thing. I stole this from a Terry Pratchett book where he describes someone and they sound like, he describes what they do. And so you get your picture in the head where he's talking about the laziest person in the world. This person just will not do anything unless it's completely necessary. They just cannot be bothered, but they're also the most intelligent person they've ever met. And so as they're describing this person, you're expecting 60, 70 stone, if they're in America, will be wheeled out of their house by a helicopter kind of thing. And when he describes their physical appearance, he's like, no, they're built like a gymnast. Because in order to put the least effort into moving and looking after his body, he has the most super refined, most efficient body. And suddenly you realize that if you take laziness to the nth degree, you put a huge amount of time into automating things, which most people go, I can't be bothered to do that. It will take too long. But then you get years of your life back because you're just not having to do them anymore. And it's great.
Yeah. How do you personally stay ahead of the evolving technology field?
The honest answer is I jacked my job in December, had nothing to do. And if I don't, then I don't make any money. So it's a case of talking to people around me, joining like round tables and communities, getting the newsletters from like Medium and Indie Hackers and some of the founder type emails, looking, I mean, Google's news, just type in technology news, AI news into Google and click the news tab, see what's happening. And just looking for things that are subtly different, things that are not the big unicorns, but the stuff on the edge. So one thing that I'm really interested in is a company that's called Sesame, because they have a just incredible voice model, and they've got this demo. And I thought this was complete hype because the journalist said, I spoke to it for 30 minutes and then the demo just literally stopped. And because the person didn't say goodbye, they felt like they'd been like cut off on the phone and that thing had just like disappeared. I was like, that can't be true. So I started talking to it, and then it happened to me, and it just like mid-sentence just stopped. And it was so jarring because the conversational AI was just so natural that you forget that you're talking to an AI. So they're working on that model. They're going to release some AI glasses. So now I'm interested in their AI glasses, which then put me down the rabbit hole of AI glasses in general and all of that. And it's just follow the rabbit hole, look for things that are subtly different, play with the basics. You know, OpenAI has released a new this, Azure have released a new thing, Google have released an agent toolkit. Go and play with it, realize it's the same as all the rest of the agents, pick your favorite one and then just carry on. And then eventually someone releases something where you go, that works very slightly differently. I'll take that idea and off I go.
Yeah. What's the biggest myth about AI that you see online?
That it thinks, doesn't think. It formulates, it's prompted to formulate things that look like thoughts. It's prompted to formulate things that look a bit like a plan. But all it's really doing is generating things that look like thoughts and plans and then using them as inputs to the model that it then predicts, if I had a plan like this, what would I do? And off we go. So it is just a giant prediction, and you can easily disprove the thinking. I think it was Apple that put out the paper that everyone got a bit fussy about because it kind of stomped on everyone's toes. But we just simply don't have the ability to model how people think and the type of experience that people have. And I think when it does think, how is it going to be relatable if it's got the experience of everyone, but it doesn't have the offline experience? All AI has is what's written down. And like all Instagram has is all of the staged pictures. I mean, yes, there's a few people who are real and they cry on camera, but even then I'm pretty sure they've been cutting onions just so that they can cry on camera. So it's that whole, like, life happens to people at the strangest times, and being able to capture that and how it changes your thinking, how it changes how you approach something. Some people get worried about making decisions at work because they don't think they're good at making decisions because they shouted at their kids, or they lost their rag while they're driving the car, or they ate a bad sandwich, or they had too many coffees. There's something that changes their bias that just can't be captured. And so I think AI, it might be able to think, but, and I can say this as someone who's autistic and ADHD, I think AI is always going to be a bit sort of explicit with everything that it does. It won't be able to do implied things. Does that make sense?
Not yet.
Yeah, I mean, we'll be here in 10 years' time discussing about how the robots in my house aren't behaving this week and I'm treating them like children. Yeah.
Are you playing around with agents at the minute?
Agents, yeah. A lot of the stuff that I do is agents. So the stuff I was talking about, the conversations, is agents. The coding farms, agents. And really, there's a big difference between sort of agentic and agents. And I can't be bothered to explain it. People make it far too complicated. It's almost like the difference between the two types of rugby. Ultimately, it's 17 stone blokes chasing an oval ball. It's, you know, if you put it down after you get tackled, that's not really what I would be worried about. I'd be worried about getting tackled by one of them. So agentic and agents, for people that haven't sort of dabbled in it, it's basically tooling that calls the AI for you. And really how it works is you prompt the AI to do something and describe some tools it can use. And it then sort of responds and realizes it needs to call the tool, does all of that for you, and then comes back and says, I've done something. And those tools, in my case, are sending emails, writing code, doing user stories, and all the rest of it. Stock trading occasionally.
Are you familiar with FlockX by Fetch AI?
No.
I'd have a look at them. You'll like it.
Okay.
Yeah.
What does that do?
So they are, well, I'll share this for another episode because I know the CTO at FlockX, based in the US, but they're trying to innovate the game when it comes to agentic AI agents. And they have use cases for both individual people, like on a general consumer basis, but also for businesses to automate their workflows. So
Nice.
I'll let you go away and have a look at it, and we'll get Mark on the show.
Yeah, definitely have a look at that. Yeah, I think the thing that I'm seeing develop is the sort of standardization of everything. So there's agent to agent protocols coming through, and then there's agent to UI protocols coming through. And so there's some really, really cool open source tooling starting to appear where the experience is going to be less you're talking to a chatbot, and instead AI is kind of powering your interface. And some of the things I'm looking at is kind of, well, yeah, I mean, we do LinkedIn ads optimization. And so if you want to see the flow of how everything's happening, I could sit there and write a huge, wonderful UI and everything else. But actually people are putting together open source toolkits that if the agent says, I want to connect these two nodes, then it just draws that on the page. And so we'll be able to do agent-driven UI. Some websites won't even look like websites anymore because they're going to essentially redraw themselves based on the journey that you're using to go through it, which would make Amazon terrifying for me, because on one side it'd be like basketball kits and the rest it'd be like Peppa Pig and Gabby's Dollhouse and everything else, and there'd be no way of me buying any kind of sports supplements or anything else because I just wouldn't be able to find them. So it would get strange.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know an awful lot about the technology behind it, which is rare to see. I speak to a lot of data leaders, and some of them are interested, but don't always double down. And there are a lot of technology leaders out there, but they don't always have the time to research. You've naturally had a bit of a break, so you've had the time to research and innovate and experiment, which is great. I want to go back to the start of your career, though, because you've had somewhat of a textbook rise from a junior dev analyst programmer to a principal and then director of engineering. But when you first started your career, did you want to be, a director of engineering, CTO type person, or did you have a goal in mind when you entered the industry?
No. The honest answer for going into tech, so I went into tech sort of in my 20s, was when I was growing up, my dad was in a band and he had a friend who drove a Subaru Impreza, and I loved cars. And I asked him what he did, and he said he worked with computers, and I think that just stuck with me. So I got a job in computers, and then I bought a few fast cars and wasted all of my money on cars that when my wife's watching this, she'll not be happy because I've just reminded her. But it wasn't, I'm not normal. I am very different to everyone else. I just approach everything with just absolute chaos, and I keep getting told huge amount of knowledge and brain power, and it's just go and do stuff and pull stuff apart, put it back together, see what happens. And it's interesting that you say about the leaders. I've always talked to people and ask them what they're up to. And I've been interested in what they're doing and why they're doing it, hence the getting into tech, because he drove a nice car. And so I think I kept that. So even when I was running, all this stuff at Compare the Market and help being principal engineer at Sky, talking to people all the time and asking them what they do gets you all of these signals about what's important to go and research and what isn't. If everyone is feeling really, really confident about something and they're all talking about it and they're all like, yeah, this is perfect and everything else, that's my signal to sort of probably just check that that's all right. Then you've got sort of this whole sort of middle layer of everyone's got their own opinion on something and they all want to run 15 different frameworks just to do the same solution. And you've just got to filter that out. And then now and then you've got someone who's kind of going, yeah, I'm doing the same as everyone else, but I'm also doing this on the side. And some leaders will sort of go, no, don't do that on the side. You need to spend every hour doing the main thing. And I'm always kind of like, what's driving you to do that? What is it about our all singing, all dancing solution that's stopping you from using it perfectly? And why do you need to do this thing? And that's where I start to look at the research. It's always those little edges where someone's just trying to push the boundaries and change something. So it's always research the mainstream, always research the obvious, get a grip on it. And then those weird little changes, because that's where the innovation is. It's where people are saying, I can't solve the problem. I need a new tool, or I need the existing tool to be used in a different way.
That's interesting. So one of my closest friends has a younger brother at university. He's studying computer science in Newcastle. And I told him I was producing a few podcasts with senior tech leaders.
Yeah.
And he actually had a question for you specifically.
Me?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
So if you were mentoring your younger self in today's digital world, would you even bother learning to code from scratch? Or would you just learn how to use AI tools properly?
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I think you should learn how to code from scratch with a twist. I've always struggled with people who call themselves, I'm a Java developer, I'm a Scala developer, I'm a C# developer. Because to me, it sounds like they've learned how to do the language and not the actual understanding of what the language is doing. Because all of those languages I've said all have objects and all have types, and they all use them slightly differently, but fundamentally they're the same things. And all of those languages let you do it in a functional or an object-orientated, or as you see in most enterprises, just a procedural kind of way. So actually understanding, why do I write objects? Why do I write functions? Why do I need to do this stuff? What are the basics, like the solid principles that everyone thinks they know but can't quite describe properly, or if they go and implement in the same way that takes them down the same rabbit hole as everyone else. And it's the people that stop and think, many, like much cleverer, much more academic people than me have spent time to work out what's the general pattern, what's the general principle that will get you out of 90% of the problems. Let's use that. And so I would get people to learn algorithms and learn why you would use a loop, why you wouldn't use a loop, why would you do it in a different way, why do you use iterators and enumerators, and start going all down the patterns of functional programming. And then use that to be able to understand why the AI has built it in a certain way. Because you need the language, not the coding skill, to be able to tell AI how to do it right. But then you also need the coding skill to understand, if the AI has made a complete dog's dinner of it, how to fix it. And to be fair, the big cheat on that is write all your code with Claude Sonnet 4.5. And when Claude gets confused, switch over to Gemini Pro. And when that gets confused, switch over to ChatGPT, and then go back to Claude and just keep going around in circles until eventually it works. And if that doesn't solve it, then the problem is not a coding problem, it's a describing the problem, where you've got to go back and say, oh, you've done this loop wrong. And I had an example of it this week. We wanted to send out a weekly digest email, and the first cut of it, the AI decided to write the weekly digest email and send out the activity of every customer and every person in Linko. Fortunately, it's not live yet. This was in our testing, to everyone, and just merged everything together, when actually what it needed to do was go through each user, look at the activity that they have access to in their organization, and then send it out to the user so that they can see only the activity in their organization, which is a much longer sentence than, can you send a weekly digest email? To which it said yes and sent the wrong thing to everyone.
Classic.
Yeah. But that's it. You've got these two sides of it, because even if you don't use AI, when you become a principal engineer, or you become a director, or you become a head of technology, and you're not coding, you still have to broadly describe either what someone needs to code, or what to tell the person who works for you, who works for them, who works for someone else to go and code, and have it all translated in the sort of, +1+1+1.
Yeah. If a mid-level or a senior developer wanted to become a principal software engineer, does it matter what technology stack they are using, or is it more about the business application and the understanding of what you were just saying, describing?
Depends on the company. Really depends on the company. So when I became a principal engineer at Sky, I had been a C# SharePoint BizTalk developer for quite a few years, because that was really hot in the contracting market. And decided to get a job because we were having kids and I just wanted a stable job, and Sky was there. Got a job, got put into a department, and on the first day was talking to someone who was like 3 levels above my boss. And he said, right, what's your background? I told him my background was C# developer. And pretty much like the third sentence that ever came out of his mouth to me was, well, what are you doing in this team? This is the most important team we've got in the business. This is our identity team, and they all do Java. How are you going to help them? To which point I realized the point of a principal engineer is not to write good code. It's to make sure that everyone around you is able to write good code, to put in the structures and the practices that either get people to be their best or push them to be further, and put in processes that help people self-regulate and self-improve. And so most of my time was spent driving the people who knew how to write Java and finding the best people, getting them to write the coding standards, and then helping them get everyone else to use the coding standards and the testing standards and the automation standards. And it wasn't super enterprisey, but it was like, what does good look like, and how do you know if you're doing good? And that's all the principal engineer is really doing. And then talking to stakeholders and saying, don't worry, it'll be fine. Yes, we can build it. Yeah, no, not next week, but maybe the week after, and so on and so on, really. So yeah.
Are there then any core principles or skills or traits that you had, or people generally have, when they want to progress from a principal engineer to a director of engineering, or a CTO, or even a CIO? How does a principal engineer become a CTO?
How does a principal engineer become a CTO? Yeah, that's a good question. That's a really good question. I think being able to walk people along the journey and being able to describe to non-technical stakeholders what you're trying to achieve, while at the same time not having your technical stakeholders and technical reliance thinking this person's got no idea what they're talking about. So it's that fine line between describing the objective and then describing the actual steps to get there. And I think being able to describe an outcome and then draw a path to that outcome and try and shepherd people along that path is the key skill. So for a principal engineer, it's trying to get your senior engineers to actually write some unit tests for the first time because they've decided that they can't be bothered, and they'll get the juniors to do it. So they've lost that skill. If you can convince stubborn people to do things that they know they should do, but they're not doing because they keep delegating it, then you take that skill, and instead of being confident in arguing about technical things, you then have to be less confident but still use the same skills and argue the business principles. And moving higher and higher and becoming more of a leader, you need to be more commercially minded and more commercially focused, not so that you can do the commercial work, but if you can speak their language and you can understand what they're talking about, you're less likely to get crossed wires. And it's really the step from a principal engineer to a director is just taking all of the skills that you've used to corral software engineers and uses slightly different language on program managers and heads of technology and everyone else.
Yeah. One of the classic cases when I speak to tech leaders of why they're struggling to gain buy-in from the execs usually comes down to the tech execs, or just execs generally, not understanding what the engineers are doing on the ground. So They don't really understand the systems. They almost don't care about the systems. They just want to know, how is this product or piece of tech or kit going to help the business from a commercial point of view? And so you're basically saying that if you're a principal engineer, it's great. You need to be able to code and do all the heavy lifting. But once you're able to talk the language that the execs talk in the boardroom, the CFO, the COO, the CCO, or whoever else is relevant, that's how you're able to, I suppose, take it up a notch, get the promotion.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, CFO is a great example. A lot of CFOs have sort of grown up in a chartered accounting kind of background, and they've spent their entire life doing spreadsheets, and nothing is, I mean, it's the same with software. Nothing's real in software, but nothing's real to them. It's just lots of numbers in lots of places that they have to shuffle around all the time. And so often they want to understand, if we send all these people off on training and it costs X amount of money, then what do we get for that? And when you say, oh, everyone feels more confident deploying to Kubernetes, they're like, right, great. And how much is that? What is that? Whereas if you say, if we send all these people off on Kubernetes training, we deploy 20 times a day and it goes wrong probably 3 times a week. And when it does go wrong, on average, we lose around 100 grand. So this training that's going to cost us 50 grand is going to save you 100 grand every couple of weeks for the rest of the year. And they can quite easily quantify that. Now, you have to sort of paint it in broad brushes and sort of what's the likelihood and what's the cost of things happening. But really, it's about trying to say, we can see we have this amount of wastage or we have this problem, and we think this is a gamble against it. And so can I have a budget of X amount that's essentially my gambling budget, that if I spend £1 million and I save you £3 million, can have another £1 million next year? And some CFOs will say, no, you can have 750. And some will say, actually, if you save me £3 million, I'll give you 2 million and I want 6 million next year. It's great. And then you talk to the legal people and they're all, what's the risk of this? Are we going to get sued? Am I going to be talking to the regulator? And you just want to just answer their questions honestly. And I don't know, I need your help goes a long way for some of this. And you sort of say, I'm worried about the possibility of this happening. And in fact, something that I was worried about at Sky went and got legal involved, and they just went, no, we'll just refund everyone. I was like, right, and that's it. And they went, well, yeah, we'll have to do this and we'll have to do that, but if it goes right, we make tens of millions of pounds, and if it goes wrong, we just refund everyone and we do it again next week. And it's like, okay, suddenly, like, it makes your life easier. So yeah, I don't know, can you help me, goes a long way into sort of getting into that next job and then being able to talk the right languages.
Yeah. I imagine there are a few CFOs who are experimenting with GenAI tools as well and chatbots.
Yeah.
Would you, as the director of engineering, CTO, CIO, whatever senior tech leadership role you're given, would you be the one to speak to the CFO and train them up? Like, should you be educating them on AI literacy around it?
I think if I was in like a director or VP role, yes. I think if I was part of the exec with them, then it would be more about talking to them about where we want to experiment and where we don't want to experiment. And then again, you'll end up in the conversation with the CFO and the chief compliance officer and probably the CEO about the risk and reward of doing those kind of things. But yeah, if I was in a VP of engineering role, I'd definitely be trying to convince more people outside of technology to take on AI and reduce waste. I mean, the consultancy I run, the Centessera consultancy, is about not removing jobs, but helping people build businesses. This is why I work with a lot of startups where everyone in the business is focused on the same thing. So you maybe don't hire a PA for a bit longer because you don't need one, because you've automated all of that away. That lets you hire an extra developer or an extra, I don't know what your business does, but an extra subject matter expert in the business, which makes you a better differentiator. And one of the easiest ways to do that is with AI, with automation, making the doing of work go away and instead focus on the value creation.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I've seen AI CFOs recently, like actual. Yeah. I don't know whether they're actual people. I saw a glimpse on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
It's quite terrifying, but I imagine it's a pretty useful tool alongside the CFO themselves. I don't know which business it was or how they were describing it, but I know there are some pretty sophisticated tools going into the chief financial office that they're using. I have to do some research on what they actually are, but I know for a fact that they need to do a bit more on the tech side of things, learn about the GenAI tools and how they can help them. Enormous amount of value that they can achieve off the back of it.
I really don't like the idea of an AI CFO or this kind of giving AI personality. I was actually talking to a really good friend a few weeks ago, and she was talking about this idea of when you have AI developers, you give them names so that people can relate to them. And the idea is that you give them names so that you treat them like employees, so that you do all the things that you would do with an employee. So monitor them and make sure there's security controls and ensure they're doing the right tasks and they're not, slacking off or doing something else. But when you're talking to something with a synthesized personality, it's just odd.
It's tricky. Yeah.
I just find it really odd because all of the sort of Gemini and ChatGPT have names for the voices rather than just give them weird names. But there seems to be this innate need for some people to have to be able to talk to a thing, a being, rather than, I don't know, it's just a robot that does stuff for me. So I'm probably the first to get crucified when the robots take over. I know I'm terrible, and I try and say please and thank you to Alexa and Siri, but I'm not very kind to AI. So yeah, I'm first on the list. I know that.
Yeah. Moving forward into next year, or maybe even the next couple of years, what are you focusing on from a technology solutions point of view? Or what are you trying to build?
Good question. So the code farm that I've called it, because it's not an AI development team, because there are people in it, even though Claude's got his name, Claude. Trying to work out how to scale that into an organization or the equivalent of an organization. So large scale development. I'm mostly trying to create myself interesting problems that I then have to go and solve, is probably the easiest way to say it. So one of the challenges we have with Linko at the moment is our ability to generate features far outstrips our users' ability to understand and implement those features and use those features. So if we can, if I can go and get the AI to write 10 features on a Monday morning, and then by Friday we could release them all, and we do that week in, week out, our users are just going to go, what the hell? I mean, a few years ago, they changed some of the colors on Facebook and there was like a political revolution across the whole of America. So I can't imagine what would happen if we just keep releasing things and the users' kind of stuff moves around all the time. So the problem now is not building the code and getting the features. The problem now is selecting the features. So now, do I end up getting AI to sit and evaluate all the features because I don't have the time to evaluate them? It's like, where does it stop? And it kind of snowballs. And then the other side is, it's I've got quite a few conversational AI projects going on, and it's one of the goals of some of the R&D I'm doing at the moment is we have a fully featured model for people to use interactively on the web, but when it's offline, is it good enough? And can we embed it in an app on the phone? And at the moment we can't, because we can't put that much data on the phone. But it would be cool if at some point there is some way to compress the model so that people can use it offline all the time, which would be really fun.
Yeah. How far away are you from building that?
Well, we're building it. Whether it works or not is a different thing. So I think we're probably about a year away from it working properly, and then probably another year away from it actually being sort of a viable piece of technology. But yeah, really, it's, if you can solve the easy problems, which is fun, like what happens next in terms of how things go. I don't know. I keep taking on advisory roles. I'm trying to sort of do little bits of everything, which seems to be keeping me really happy, really motivated, and I can pay the mortgage. So that's the most important thing. My wife's happy. I don't have to get a real job, I guess, that she calls them. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah. What's the one piece of advice you'd give every leader in terms of AI strategy? What do they need to know?
What do they need to know? Rules are there to be broken, but you have to accept the consequences. So try things out. Like getting people to play with it is probably the hardest thing. So rather than waiting for an all singing, all dancing, like enterprise locked down, super safe, super way of doing it, find a simpler way to get people using AI, encourage them to use it outside of work, because as soon as you start to get that demand and that understanding and you get over the worry of what it can or can't do, and in fact people are more in the realm of frustration that they now need to use it, the better. So try and find a way to get people just playing with it, because they'll soon find that actually it does serve a good purpose.
Awesome. Before we wrap up then, for those interested in your tech startup, your various business endeavors, tech endeavors, how's the best way to learn more and follow your journey?
Follow me on LinkedIn. There's sporadic posts of what's going on, but that's usually where we keep all the updates. So yeah, the key businesses. So there's Syntessera, which is my sort of consultancy. There are other people involved in that that I bring in on an as needs basis. There's Linklo, which is me and Matt. That's the LinkedIn ads optimization platform. We're quietly launching that next week. So our existing clients are being moved over. We've got a couple of big new clients going on the platform in the next month or so. And then, I'm an advisor to other businesses that's going to get sort of announced over the next few days. So yeah, LinkedIn's best. I don't really post on anything else. I'm too busy either playing with the technology, looking after the 4 kids, playing basketball, or I'm at the gym. So it keeps me busy.
Awesome. Well, Joe, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining.
No, thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Yeah. I guess we'll cut there.
Yeah.
Cheers,
Great. Awesome.
Cheers.
Very good.
It's awesome.
Thank you.